Cheers, Sam Dowler.
Cheers, Laurence.
Journalist and broadcaster.
Mm-hmm.
We both lost a loved one during the pandemic, didn't we?
We did.
Tell me your story.
Well, my dad had cancer for 7 years, myeloma. And when the pandemic hit, it was actually one of the 2 cancers that Boris mentioned in his very first speech about it, and which is odd because I'd never even really heard of myeloma. So my dad was always like, ding, ding, oh my God, I can't leave the house. And, you know, he had a bit of OCD anyway, so this was like playing into his paranoia. So, yeah, that was it. He didn't leave the house for 2 years, other than we drove him down to UCLH for treatment. But yeah, we just doing no exercise and all of that just obviously didn't help matters. And yeah, and then it was a year ago last December. So where were we in the pandemic? It was just before Christmas was cancelled, I believe, wasn't it? And
or not if you were in Downing Street.
Yeah, and yeah, and I was living with my mum, and my dad was downstairs in a hospital bed, and my sister was over from Australia. My other sister lives in the same town, so she was round, like, because he was spending his last days in bed. And then I came home from something in London, and the next morning I woke up and couldn't taste or smell anything, and it was bad. Like my brain fog. It was so. I don't know if you had COVID or whether.
Twice.
Yes, well done. But the no taste and smell was just like really debilitating. So I did a test, and I was my partner was with me as well, and he works in care, so he like scarpered. Thanks. No.
Thanks, love. Bye.
But yeah, so that was on the Thursday, and on the Saturday or the Sunday, I think it was, my mum came upstairs. I said straight away. My mum came upstairs and said that he was going. So I went downstairs in full PPE because I didn't want to
give it to him.
I didn't want to give it to my mum. She's 70. She was 70 at the time, and my Australian sister was going back to Australia, and they had some of the most stringent
rules ever. Those
yes.
Crazy how quickly they turned into their descendants of prison guards.
Laurence. So they so she obviously didn't want to get it either. So I went downstairs and I said goodbye and gave him a hug, and went back upstairs, and then he died that night, and then I stayed in my room for another 5 days.
That must have been very hard mentally to deal with.
It was the worst time of my life.
I'm sorry.
With no one to hug or
console you or to share your grief with. That's what infuriated me, because my mum passed away in April of 2020, and then it was just horrendous. But we obviously, our family, as you may not have noticed, didn't really care about the COVID type deal as a general. Actually, I think one of them did. I can't remember who. But we went, and my mum was on her way, and the doctor turned up in full PPE and all masks and everything, and was sort of sobbing all over each other. And I think my sister went, "What do we do?" And he went, "It's your mum. She's going. Hug her, hold her." So we all did. So it was a sort of slightly different one. But then when I found out that they were partying in Downing Street not long after, my fury was huge. So it sounds like, you know, you were in the full PPE, but you had gone out.
I'd gone out.
So the PPE wasn't a sort of standard something to wear. It was just for this instance.
It was just because I'd got it.
Yeah.
And it was vital not to give it to my mum, not to give it to my sister, because if my sister had got it, like, they wouldn't have let her back in the country, and she was already 3 months away from seeing her husband and her two kids. Yeah. So it just would have put that back even further. Like, so I understand, you know, why it was important and why I had to stay in my room, but like, it was just horrendous. Like, I don't blame anybody, but
do you not blame anybody? I blame a lot. I mean, the Twitter files came out. The first Fauci files have come out today and yesterday even, and I'm really blaming people. You know, Boris was nudged The whole country was nudged. Laura Dodsworth's covered that really well. This thing has got a 99.8% survival rate. We're getting excess deaths now. Do those lives not matter in the same way? I mean, I'm furious, if I'm honest. I think the whole thing was a complete and utter con and a scam.
Well, I don't think it was a con or a scam because I know
it's real.
I know people who died of it and
with it or of it?
Of it and with it.
Right.
And they suffocated to death. So it was...
No, I'm not saying it's not real. What I'm saying is...
It's a horrible way to go.
But it's as evil as flu.
No. You can die of flu and it isn't like... If you die of suffocation, like you like... A friend of mine's uncle died of it and his rictus was like...
Oh, God. And
that is not the first time I've heard that. And so... Whether you have to weigh that up, obviously, whether because obviously I think the lockdown, etc. Because I lost 4 friends during the pandemic, and I would say one of them had COVID and he died of COVID, and the other 3 were mental health related. Yeah, the mental health, but that's what I mean. It's of course somebody dying of suffocation is a dreadful and horrible way to go, but there are lots of other lives and lots of other ways to die, which are needed to be accounted for. Yeah. And the mental health thing, as you say, was just thrown out. We don't see people as whole beings. We see them as meat bodies that need to be treated, and we don't treat this. And that's horrendous. I agree. People talk about mental health. Oh, he's got mental health. We've all got mental health. Yeah. It's mental health problems. That is what people mean. And, friends of mine, they were on their own and, they were gay men in their 40s, single, and were at risk of suicide. And same as straight men in their 40s. It's a pandemic of its own. And so I'm not saying that was what happened with these guys. I don't know. It wasn't, no notes or anything like that. But when it seems that way. And one of my friends was Nikki Graham, and she died, and obviously she had anorexia very severely, and it's very unusual to die of anorexia. But we couldn't see her obviously, and I spoke to her on the phone, and she was like, "Fine, I'm fine." But if you can't see somebody with something like that, you can't tell. No. So, I've no doubt that it facilitated towards other deaths, but at the same time, I feel like it was the only option that they could think of. It's never happened before. I don't think it'll ever happen again. Well, you say that, but during the Spanish flu, they didn't shut down the economy. Wasn't that in the 1920s? It was. They still didn't shut down the economy. No, but we didn't even have internet, whether we knew death. Well, they knew there was a plague going around, and there were people dying in the trenches still. Yeah, I know. I don't think we would ever go into lockdown again or anything like that unless it was unless it was some sort of like flesh-eating virus that you could get down the shops. But then you'd lock yourself down. This is the thing. This is the thing that bothers me. It's like, why did the government get to decide what I did with my life? It's absolutely unprecedented. So I just decided straight away I was going to ignore absolutely everything they said because I didn't believe them. Yeah, but then you run the risk, which I know you did run the risk and did it, of the ire of the nation, where people are but then they were all partying. I know. Beth Rigby, all of these people were partying. I just happened to be honest about it. The hypocrisy is obviously out of this world. I mean, thing is, like, it was weird. It was weird in the pandemic and in the lockdown. There were times of great joy. Do you know what I mean? Like when everybody were all at home, it was odd. Do you know what I mean? I would, like, as I said, my sister lives quite near, and we would go and sit up on, take the dogs, sit 2 feet apart, and drink a bottle of rosé. Do you know what I mean? Like, and I played by the rules 90% of the time. Like as I said, and like going back to what happened with my dad, like which was why obviously for me and for you, it was particularly irritating. In fact, brutal. Gave me super anger when I saw that, obviously members of the government, including the Prime Minister, weren't playing by the rules that they after because obviously mine's not the only. They knew how bad it was. They knew. What you mean? They didn't think it was that bad? I think that they absolutely pushed it to the hilt to make us as terrified. For what gain? Because it's an easy way to control people, isn't it? But they don't need to control us. For what reason would they want to control us for one whole year?
Well, you managed to. This is the biggest transfer of wealth in the history of mankind.
What do you mean? When Rishi was dishing out the cash to his mates?
Well, no, when we locked down, it was the biggest transfer of wealth ever. That's just a standard thing, and we were all turned into like little
drones.
Battery hens who could sort of peck at the food, while Nancy Pelosi went off and got a haircut, and Gavin Newsom sat eating maskless in the.
Well, that's America.
But it happened here with our own government people. Anyway, look, I think you're saying that you thought the measures were proportionate, but you wouldn't want to lock down again.
I wouldn't want to, but I don't think it would ever happen again. I mean, like you said, there's too much evidence. There's too much.
It didn't work.
Well, yeah, and also I don't think unless it was something like a flesh-eating virus or something's going to turn you into a zombie, would it merit such a reaction?
Yeah, well, exactly. It was a novel coronavirus. They didn't know what to do. I think they made the biggest mistake and the worst choice in history.
But that's a mistake is different to a choice.
Well,
it wasn't. I don't think it was.
Okay, but they didn't.
I don't think it was a cynical decision to do it for any sort of gain.
Well, they closed churches. They closed places of worship. They closed. This is like just unprecedented.
They're just the same as any other places.
Attack on civil liberty. Well, they didn't close Walmart, did they? Or Sainsbury's?
People need to eat. They don't need to pray.
Well,
they can pray at home.
You might say people need to eat. Of course, people need to eat, but you can have food deliveries. You can have whatever.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's go on to Pride. What do you think of Pride?
So
why do you think I don't like Pride?
So the reason I think it's extremely important. So Euro Pride is obviously the pinnacle of Europe's Pride. We all have Pride. You have Hull Pride, Hertfordshire Pride. They're everywhere. And Euro Pride had to be cancelled last year because of right-wing politicians. This was in Serbia, and Roman Catholics who was standing in the street saying it was disgusting, Anyway, so therefore they weren't even allowed to march the streets. So that is wrong, obviously, because people should be allowed to express themselves.
That's discrimination against someone based on their sexual orientation, which is utterly wrong.
Exactly. So the next one is World Pride, which is in Sydney World Pride, which I'm going to, and it is. Not only is it obviously it's in Australia, and we just talked about how bad that was to get into Australia. So at least it's opened up, and we can go there, and it's like it's a focus when all around the world LGBTQ rights are being rolled back, not rolled forward. That's why it's important.
When you say LGBTQ, this is one of my problems with Pride.
Plus.
2 pluses, actually, for Two-Spirit, isn't it?
I just used the one.
Okay, you can use the plus if you like. To me, the way that I look at people is I just take them as I find them. I don't, obviously you notice things like skin colour and, if someone is massively camp or something, you can...
How dare you?
Darling. And, but I take people as I find them. So I find a lumping of people into groups. Also, I've got a few gay friends. I don't have any lesbian friends. I don't know why. But my gay friends tell me, anecdotally, and you can correct me if this is wrong, that gays and lesbians don't necessarily get on that well. So why would you lump, so the L is first, why would you lump individuals into an enormous group?
Okay, first of all, that's nonsense. I don't know what gay friends you have, but I have many lesbian friends, and I have for many years, and I love them dearly, and I have many.
But you get my point. I'm not trying to say they don't get on. I'm just trying to say that groups of individuals.
Lumping them together is a way of protection. That's why there's a T.
Or exploitation.
That is why there's a T in there as well for transgender, because they are the most vulnerable group that need the most help, and at a time when they are being particularly vilified in America, for example, all over the place, and to the point where the scaremongering leads to crazy people murdering them, which happens all the time in America, not over here so much.
Well, you've got to look at the stats on that one, Sam.
We're together as lumped together as you say. I mean, of course, there are splinter groups or people like the LGBT Alliance, for example, who say that trans isn't about sexuality, it's about gender, But But trans people were the people that started like the Stonewall riots, for example. We stick together because there is safety in numbers, and you can't deny that that somebody walking down the street who might be super camp, etc., as you just said, will be vulnerable to people going like, all right, perf, like going to beat them up. If simply by being with other people, you are safer. And that is the crux of it.
Why an LGBTQ history month, a Pride month? Why not that I am advocating for any. I don't want any months. I just want to take people as I find them. So maybe that just makes me different.
Yeah.
So have you suffered a lot of homophobic abuse in your life?
Not a lot, but some.
Yeah, but I've suffered abuse as well. For just being a posh, lanky.
Yeah, I get that, but that doesn't result in you getting beaten up, raped, or killed.
Well, it does actually, and it has done in clubs. I almost got beaten up. I haven't had a fight since I was.
Did they recognise you?
What the other weekend I went to a party at an American person's house, and then afterwards one of the people I was with said, "Can we go for a drink?" Yeah. And then someone came up to me, and I was going to get into a fight with them because of what I think. Do you know what I mean?
It's because you're a broadcaster and you say controversial things, and obviously.
Well, I just say what I think. It doesn't make it controversial.
But for some people, it rubs people up the wrong way.
Yeah, but do I deserve to be punched in the face for it?
No, of course not. I don't think anybody should get any sort of violence at all. But like, obviously, some people would want to come up to you and question you about things that you have said. So I'm saying,
but we all suffer from discrimination, right? Yeah. I happen to suffer from philosophical discrimination. So why can't it be LGBTQ plus P?
Well, for example,
I come and join?
Going to go back into, you can be an ally, of course, but to go back into you go back into a month, right? You go back into like a month, or like Black History Month, for example.
Don't like that month either.
Yeah, of course you don't, because LGBTQ people and Black people over years have been persecuted. So therefore, it is important to look back on what has happened and how we can make sure it doesn't happen again, and to educate everybody.
Do you think that's what's happening at the moment? I think what's happening is there's more, ever since this movement started, which
movement?
This Pride movement and this
50 years
ever growing. Yeah, but I was pretty chilled with the rainbow flag. I could deal with it. I thought, good for you. You were in the middle of a time when there was real, proper, systemic oppression to gay and lesbian people. I get it. Let's start a movement. Now it feels like certainly we're not doing a lot of favours for the trans community, aren't doing themselves a lot of favours with things like drag queen story hours and some of the stuff that you see at these Pride marches, that get circulated around the internet.
To talk about drag queen story hours, it's not about them doing themselves no favours. This is something that the community wants. They're not imposing.
Which community?
All communities. If they want to,
I've not met a single parent who wants to go.
You haven't met them. It's the same as like you say with the LGBTQ stuff. It doesn't really concern you because you're not. So it's therefore, if other people want to march or have their rights, it doesn't.
I'm happy for them to march.
It doesn't affect you though, does it? So why do you need to have an opinion saying, they shouldn't do it, they shouldn't, like I said, going back to drag queen story.
Well, because in exactly the same way as I wouldn't want white supremacist month.
What is your problem with drag queen story hour?
My problem with drag queen story hour is that I don't think children should be sexualised that early.
How is that sexualising them?
Well, I think a man dressed as a woman, often provocatively, reading to children, is going to confuse children.
Have you taken your kids to a pantomime?
I have taken my kids to a pantomime. It's not the same thing.
Of course it's the same thing.
I've also been to the most amazing, what's it called, in Blackpool?
Drag shows.
I'm falling in love. So I'm not saying I have a problem. I just think kids do not need this.
But listen, I know you are somebody who talks about tradition, British tradition, etc. And like pantos are a British tradition. Have been going on for 100 years or something, and they always feature a drag queen going, saying sexual things. Double entendres, left, right, and centre, and kids especially have lapped it up for years and years and years. And drag queen story was just maybe an offshoot of that. They're not sitting there, saying sexual stuff to children and saying this is what you need to do. You need to, if that's what you think, you need to sit in on a drag queen story hour and then give us an opinion afterwards.
Okay, let's make it about kids then. Mm-hmm. So they now teach in schools gender ideology to children. Do you think that's a good idea, young kids?
I think
still believe in Santa.
I think to withhold education from children is a mistake. I'm not saying you should teach them inappropriate things, but like and when they're talking about gender identity in schools, they're not. I've seen what it's about. They are saying that it's okay if that's how you feel. And I know we've discussed this before on TV. And and it's by saying that it's all right if you're this way, it's all right if you're that way. That's okay to say that. They're not trying to recruit a trans army. They are just literally just informing kids. If they'd inform kids about gays and lesbians, all LGBTQ stuff as kids, it would eradicate homophobia, by in a generation.
It hasn't eradicated homophobia.
But it hasn't happened. It hasn't. It's only been happening more recently.
No, it's made it all worse. It's made people divided. The whole thing has made people divided.
I don't believe it has.
You don't think diversity and inclusion has divided people?
What it might have done for older people, we have to be led by kids and by young people.
What?
Yeah, no, listen. They are. No, but
you came up with that idea.
Yeah, but young people.
I'm going to be led by kids. What should I do?
No, obviously not like that. But young people.
Clothes, son.
I don't mean.
Yeah, Dad, do.
Young people
Should I run this red light?
Young people are the next generation. They will be taking over. Do you know what I mean? At some point. And I'm talking about I'm talking about millennials in their in their 20s, etc. So and they are the ones who like homophobia, transphobia, biphobia, is gradually getting kids don't say, oh, you're gay and stuff in school anymore, and they certainly did when I was at school. And so it changes in time, and it's only the older generation who are balking because it's othering to them. They don't understand it, and it's like what people don't understand, they're afraid of.
Well, I don't know whether it's about not understanding. It's about my simple question, which is what I said to you, which was, do you think that teaching gender ideology to a child who still believes that Santa Claus is real is a good idea?
Yeah, I do, yeah. I think it's already happening in our country.
So once that child goes, who's already confused, God knows
if they're confused already...
I was confused when I was a child.
This is what I'm saying. If they're confused already, then telling them that it's okay to be confused is fine, surely.
Well,
otherwise they go home and they internalise that.
Okay.
Surely that's worse.
Well, okay. So the child is confused. It goes, it's a boy. It goes, you know what? I think I actually might be a girl. Mm. And then they go home and they've got a parent who will affirm that notion in them, and they'll grow their hair out.
Mm. Fine.
Right?
I have friends who are going through this right now.
And they start wearing dresses. And they hang out with the girls at school. What's next?
Well, nothing's next.
What's next when they hit puberty?
Well, it's the thing. I mean, look, the pendulum has to swing both one way in order to come back to the middle.
But what's next?
So what I'm saying is that, no one has all the answers at the moment. Nobody knows the right thing or the wrong thing to do. Everybody's just sort of muddling along. And the point is they are trying to make kids feel comfortable.
Yeah, but what's this? You're putting a child on pretty much. If you're talking about protecting the mental health of children, which is what we are sort of talking about, if that child has now got long hair and is wearing a dress.
What's your alternative? To tell them they can't cut their hair like that? You're a boy and you'll wear boys' clothes. Is that what you would say?
I told both my sons, I'm really sorry to be, is this transphobic? I told both my sons that they were boys.
No, of course not. Are they boys?
Yeah.
Yeah, but if one of them said, I feel like I'm non-binary, I'm going to have long hair.
What the beep is non-binary?
It means you don't feel either.
But it doesn't matter what you feel.
Of course it is.
It's what you got between your legs.
No, it isn't.
And your chromosomes.
Of course it isn't. And also the census came out, what was it, last week?
It's identity versus reality.
1.5 million people in this country over 16 identify as LGBTQ. That's 1.5 million. And of those, 0.5 million... 0.5 million are trans.
Right.
And that's...
a very small number.
Yeah, and that is...
with a very loud voice.
Yeah, but it's a tiny man. Certainly nothing to be afraid of. And that's...
Well, I'm just saying, I'm trying to get back to this point.
Yeah.
Because I'm interested. I'm not trying to trap you. I'm saying... you're there, you're in your dress, you've got your long hair.
You're saying what next?
And you suddenly go, maybe I'm not a girl.
Yeah, fine. You stop wearing a dress.
Yeah, but do you think that's what happens? Or do you think you're on, you remember how cripplingly insecure one is at school?
Of course, yeah.
How cripplingly insecure. And, stories of one of my mates came out to his dad. They never spoke again.
Yeah, of course.
So I know.
Of course. So how strong would you have to be as a child to go through that and to wear long hair
and
to wear a dress
and then to go out of it?
Yeah. So how? Yeah, fine.
Then to shave your head off and pretend to be a bloke again.
Think of how strong you would have to be as a child to go. Think of how strong any trans person has to be to go out of the house, like knowing that they are likely to be abused at some point just during the day. And the same as with children. So no one would choose to do that. No one would choose to do that.
Well, I don't know.
And kids wouldn't choose to do that. The thing is, like, the more people, especially like yourself, saying that to your sons, for example, I mean, like, kids like to rebel. So they might think, you know, F you, Dad, that's what I'm going to do. Do you know what I mean? They might well do that.
Yeah, but
therefore, like, you know, it has to be a balance between, like, what you have to be like, okay, fine, you go for that, kids. By saying not to do something, that might make them want to do it more.
I don't say not. I'm not saying not anything. I'm asking a question which I'm not answering, which is if that person is now in their dress with their long hair, hanging out with the girls in class, and then they have either a change of mind.
Yeah. I just said what they would do. They would go back to how they were before.
They couldn't. That
Why
would
not?
cripple you.
Why? If it was their decision to go through that to begin with, they could just as easily not do it. The whole point is...
I think it's just a pathway they feel then obligated.
So you think, no, people aren't that weak that they would think that they would have
Children are that vulnerable.
They would have to carry on throughout their... to go through puberty, get to 18 and still feel like they wanted to go through hormone therapy, etc., simply because they were too embarrassed to cut their hair again. That's silly.
What's the earliest you can take puberty blockers, Lupron in this country?
16, I think.
Is it?
Yeah.
But the Tavistock is closing because it was seeing children younger.
Tavistock it's closed because it was too centralised, and now it's spread out to other.
So you think your view is it's literally just bigotry from the older generation?
No, I don't think it's bigotry. I think it's they don't understand. It's like going back to what I said about pride. This is why it's important to have pride, because you know it is educational. I know obviously it's a big party, and like you know, in Sydney World Pride will be a big party, and it'll be about that. But it'll be like a focus as well for people around the world who do feel like they are being oppressed, to see something like that and be like, phew, I'm not alone, even if I'm just seeing it in pictures. The whole point of it, all of it, is to make people feel comfortable and to feel okay in their own skin. And that, surely, you wouldn't have a problem with that.
I absolutely don't have a problem with that. What I have a problem with is the fact that it's politicised. It's become a political thing. And also, I actually think, if I'm really honest, I think I don't like the group. I think minority groups are, if you look at this, what's going on in terms of this diversity, equity and inclusion drive, which is basically to level out the playing field and give everyone exactly the same outcome in their life, regardless of meritocratic ability and stuff like that. I actually think that movement, which is communism, essentially, it is trying to force everyone to have the same, dragging down the intelligent people to, you know, so everyone has the same outcome. That's communism. That's the tenets of communism. You mean equality of outcome.
You mean hypothetically dragging down the intelligent ones?
Yes, and dragging up the less, or you know, you get sporty people, you get academic people. Yeah. Everyone's an individual, which is my thing of this. I think that the danger of this actually is that marginalised groups and minority groups are being used to sell this agenda.
By whom?
By those who wish to bring...
Selling what? And getting what from it?
What do you mean? Who's selling what? It's communism.
So you think the LGBTQ movement is about communism?
No, I think it's being used by those
communists.
By the diversity, equity and inclusion lot.
And they're communists?
Of course they are. Equity is communism.
So who are these lot, do you mean, these lot?
Well, diversity, equity and inclusion, of which you have one, the NHS spend tens of millions of pounds on them every year. Stanford University in America has 15,000 administrators and 16,000 students. So that's 15,000 people without jobs, just there to police diversity, equity and inclusion. Now, equity is equality of outcome, not equality of opportunity, right? That's communism. That's what I think is the problem here.
Do I think there's overreach? Yes.
Right. That's all. Yeah, we just got to find some common ground.
Yeah, I do think there is overreach, and I do think some drives are things that, for example, that the trans community don't even want to happen. Do you know what I mean? And it makes...
And also the suicide rates for people post 8 years after surgery are as high. in the trans community.
Are they as high? I would like to see those figures as well.
That's the figures. Those are the figures. 8 years after.
I'd like to see your sources on that one. But however, I do, like a common ground would be like, I do think, as I said, the pendulum has to swing both ways in order to come together. And like, we're in a time of cultural change. We're in a time of like, great change throughout the world and, and division. And I think, coming together is obviously the most important
Why can't
thing.
we all come together?
Isn't that what we're trying to do?
No, because you've got the LGBTQ++.
Well, they're not trying to push other people away. They're not trying to push straight people away.
Well, it's Pride Month
so that people can feel like they know their own history. Like, I mean, history is history that you get taught in schools.
Yeah.
Like, and I
didn't get taught Ugandan history in British schools.
If we were taught LGBTQ stuff in schools, great. Then they wouldn't need to do it. Or if there was,
what's wrong with one lesson where you just go?
If it was all across the curriculum, if we were taught, for example, I was never taught like about Alan Turing, for example, which was like such an incredible story
and horrendous
and absolutely horrendous, of course.
But we look at we are progressive. We would never consider but except now we are considering chemically castrating people again.
But of course, because that isn't, of course, like that part of isn't in the national curriculum, for example. Then, therefore, it is in the LGBTQ History Month, etc.
Well, it should be in the national curriculum.
Of course,
it's ridiculous.
There was so much that should be.
It's one lesson. You're a boy. You're a girl. Some of you are going to end up. Well, the majority of you are going to end up being straight. Some of you are going to end up being falling in love with someone of the same sex, and a very small minority of you may or may not end up being trans. You're all loved. End of lesson. That could be LGBTQ history lesson. Just done. Accept people and love them for who they are.
The thing is, Laurence, I know you hate phrases like this, but it's lived experience.
Oh, not again!
Your face.
I can't cope!
I got Laurence Fox to do that, so I'm happy days.
It's not...
Because you don't...
I don't like this one thing of putting two words together.
Because it's not happened to you.
What hasn't happened to me?
So therefore, you haven't lived the experience of being an LGBTQ person.
And you've not lived my experience.
Yeah, I know.
It doesn't need the word lived in front of it. It's just experience.
It does. No, because you've lived it. It's an experience that you've lived. So that's why they go together.
Well, they used to have a word for it called experience.
That's just linguistics. You can't get angry with linguistics.
I'm not angry about anything. I'm enjoying talking to you. And it's actually the most lovely thing as we wrap up is that we can talk. And that is the most important thing.
And I think it's essential.
And you what?
I think it's essential.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think we shouldn't demonize each other's views.
No.
Because I think we're individuals and we need to love and respect one another. And that is what our duty in life is. So I think it's amazing that we talk and we can disagree robustly, but still give each other a big hug, which we're going to do now. Come and give me some COVID, baby. And thank you very much, Chin Chin.
Thank you for having me.
And it's been lovely talking.
Cheers.
Cheers.